Have you ever noticed how the loudest explosions in our lives often happen in total silence? We expect catastrophe to come with a bang, a car crash, a slamming door scream. But more often than not, the end of the world arrives in a whisper. It sits down on your couch, crosses its legs, and tells you it is tired. I don't remember what show was playing on the muted TV that night. It was just light, flickering against the walls of the home we had spent 20 years paying for. The only sound in that dim living room was the tail end of her sentence, hanging in the air like smoke. I just feel bored. Andrew, she said it so casually. She could have been commenting on the humidity or a stain on the rug. But I swear, as I sat there holding my drink, it felt like she had reached inside my chest and flicked the main breaker off. Bored. Kara sat curled on the corner of our brown sectional, the one we bought for the house before we even moved in. Her legs were tucked under her like nothing was wrong. Her voice had that breezy, indifferent tone she had perfected over the last few years, a tone she used when she wanted to say something cruel without claiming the weight of the cruelty. I set my drink down on the coffee table. I did it slowly. At our age, you learn that reacting quickly usually leads to regret. I want to be sure I heard her right. Bored, I echoed carefully. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had stood beside me through 2 recessions, the loss of my parents, and the quiet drift of our middle age. You mean with dinner? Or the show? Or your life? She didn't flinch. She didn't even look up from the pattern on the throw pillow. I don't know, Andrew. Everything. This routine. Us. You. There it was. The truth. Naked and shivering in the middle of our living room. I didn't mean it as an attack, she added, but you knew it would hit like one. My voice dropped lower. I felt a heaviness settle in my stomach, the kind of heaviness that tells you life is about to change, and not for the better. She rolled her eyes and gave a bitter little smile. I can't say how I feel now. Is that it? Oh, you can say whatever you want, I replied. But don't act surprised when the weight of your words actually lands. You don't get to drop a bomb and then complain about the dust. Something shifted in her posture then. She became defensive, her arms crossing over her chest, her gaze darting away to the hallway, to the kitchen, anywhere but my eyes. I'm not blaming you, she muttered. I'm just tired of feeling like every day is the same. You go to work, I go to work, we eat, we sleep, rinse, repeat. It's suffocating. I looked around the room. I saw the bookshelves I built. I saw the framed photos of trips we took when we had more energy and less money. I saw life. A good life. A safe life. So, you want excitement? I asked, you want fireworks? Or, do you want a different man? That was a knife thrown in the dark. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But when you live with someone for decades, you develop a sixth sense for their drifting. You know when they're present, and you know when they're just occupying space. Kara shot up from the couch. That's not fair. No, I said. I stood up too, but I moved slowly. Deliberate. My knees popped slightly. A reminder that we weren't young anymore. That we didn't have time to burn everything down and start over. What's not fair? Kara is throwing the word bored at a man who has been building a life with you, brick by brick, for 20 years. What exactly do you think boredom costs? She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Because it cost me everything, I said. It cost me my peace. It cost me the security of knowing that when I come home, I am coming home to a partner, not a roommate who is counting the minutes until she can be somewhere else. She took a shaky breath. I never said I didn't love you. You said it without saying it. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the glass on the table. But my voice was low, steady, controlled. And I think that terrified her more than any scream ever could. You don't get to float boredom into the room like perfume and pretend it doesn't stink, I said. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in months. And she didn't like what she saw. She didn't see the accommodating husband who would apologize for her bad mood. She saw a wall. Instead of fighting, she spun around. She grabbed her phone from the armrest. She never went anywhere without that phone lately, and stormed upstairs. Each step of hers creaked. I knew exactly which floorboards were loose. I had promised to fix them next weekend. Now, I wondered if there was any point. The front door didn't slam. She didn't leave the house. She just retreated to the bedroom, closing the door with a soft click that sounded final. Her silence was louder than any goodbye I had ever heard. I stayed there, staring into the quiet. The TV flickered, casting blue shadows across the floor. The walls held the echo of the life we built. Photos of a wedding in Boulder, vacations to Breckenridge. 2 bikes leaned in the hallway that we hadn't ridden in 3 years because her back hurt, or my work was too busy, or it was just too much effort. I sank slowly back into the couch and exhaled. The air felt thin. Here is what you should know about me. My name is Andrew. I am 52 years old. I'm a numbers guy, a systems analyst for a mid-sized firm in downtown Denver. I am quiet. I am predictable. I take the trash out on Thursdays. I water the plants every Saturday morning. I don't forget birthdays, and I don't raise my voice unless the Broncos score a touchdown. For a long time, I genuinely believed that was enough. We live in a brick duplex just west of Sloan's Lake. It's one of those neighborhoods where the lawns are neat, the arguments are quiet, and everything looks perfect from the outside. It looks like a postcard you would send to people you want to impress, people you never actually plan to visit. But tonight, sitting in the dark, I felt something crack open. I saw in her eyes before she walked away. It wasn't just boredom. It was a flicker of guilt, maybe fear. As I sat alone in that still room, listening to the house settle around me, I realized something chilling. This wasn't the beginning of a fight. This wasn't a rough patch we would talk through over coffee in the morning. This was the beginning of the end. And I was done playing dumb. The sunlight that poured into the kitchen the next morning felt almost sarcastic. It was too warm, too clean. It struck the granite countertops with a cheerfulness that felt offensive, like a guest laughing at a funeral. It hadn't witnessed what was said the night before. It didn't know that the foundation of this house had developed a hairline fracture while everyone was sleeping. I sat at the breakfast bar, the same spot I had occupied for 15 years. My phone was in my hand, and I was scrolling through the news, but I wasn't reading. The words blurred together. Wars in distant countries. Fluctuating interest rates. The weather forecast calling for unseasonably warm temperatures. None of it mattered. I was trying to act like I hadn't barely slept. I didn't want to admit that I had lain in the dark for hours, counting the seconds between the creaking of the upstairs floorboards. I had heard her pacing after midnight. I had heard the soft, insect-like buzz of her phone vibrating against the nightstand. Once, twice, then a long silence. The coffee maker hummed behind me, a familiar, grinding sound that used a signal to start a productive day. Now it just sounded like noise. The smell of toasted cinnamon rolls floated in the air, sweet, cloying, heavy. Kara moved through the kitchen like a scene from a commercial. She was wearing a soft, oatmeal-colored sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her smile was glued in place. Morning, she chirped. She said it as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't cracked our life open 12 hours ago with one careless word, as if boredom was just a mood that passed with the sunrise like a headache. She slid a mug of coffee toward me. It was black, just how I take it. Then she walked behind me and kissed the top of my head. It was a light, airy peck. It felt performative. It felt like a gesture she had read in a book about how to maintain a marriage, rather than an impulse of affection. Thought I'd make something sweet today, she said, leaning against the counter. You've been working so hard lately. Hard work. That is what she reached for. Safe ground. She complimented my labor because she couldn't compliment our connection. She praised the provider because she was losing respect for the man. I looked up slowly and gave her a quiet nod. Thanks. I didn't ask if she slept well. I didn't ask her about her schedule for the day. I didn't offer the small talk that usually greased the wheels of our morning routine. She took a seat across from me, biting into a cinnamon roll like this was just another Tuesday. She chewed thoughtfully, watching me. You want one? She offered, her voice light, innocent. I smiled faintly. Maybe later. She leaned forward, elbows on the counter, watching me like she was gauging the structural damage of a building after an earthquake. Her eyes flicked to my phone. You've been quiet, she said. Just catching up on headlines? Anything interesting? I shrugged. Mostly noise. We both knew the real noise had happened in this kitchen last night. We both knew the elephant was sitting right there on the bar stool between us. But she wasn't ready to revisit that. She wanted a clean slate. She wanted a pretend morning where we played the happy couple who eats cinnamon rolls and talks about the weather. But my silence wasn't about pretending. It was about observing. When you spend years trusting someone implicitly, you stop looking, you stop noticing the details because you assume the picture hasn't changed. But the moment that trust fractures, your vision clears. Suddenly, you become a detective in your own life. Car had turned away to check the oven, humming a tune I didn't recognize. In that moment, I picked up my phone again. I didn't open the news app this time. I tapped open her Instagram profile. I don't even know what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I wasn't a jealous man. I never demanded her passwords. I never looked over her shoulder. I thought we were past that. We were in our 50s, for God's sake. Drama was supposed to be for the young. Her recent posts were innocuous enough. A picture of a latte art heart. A shot of the sunset from a rooftop bar downtown. A photo of our dog, Buster, sleeping in the sun. But then I looked closer. It wasn't the photos. It was the comments. There was a name I didn't recognize. It showed up just a little too often. Bryce L. I scrolled back a few weeks. There he was again, always glowing. Another one. You deserve more weekends like this. It was subtle. It was just enough to slip under the radar of a busy husband who trusted his wife. But when I read that comment, you deserve more weekends like this, something cold settled in my gut. Which weekends? The ones where she told me she was at a non-profit gala? The ones where she said she was helping her sister move furniture? I clicked on his profile. It all began to pull into focus. Private account. Of course. The profile picture was tiny, but I could make it out. A guy in sunglasses and a backwards cap, standing near Red Rocks. He looked younger, maybe 40. He looked like the kind of guy who didn't worry about mortgages or cholesterol or retirement funds. He looked like excitement. Mutuals? None. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I locked the screen and set the phone down on the granite, just as Kara turned back around. I was thinking, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. Maybe we could do dinner at that sushi place this weekend. That new one near 17th Street. You know, the one you read the review about? She was offering a peace offering. Sushi. A date night. A bandage for a bullet wound. I nodded slowly. Sure. Her shoulders loosened slightly. She exhaled, a tiny sound of relief. She thought the piece was holding. She thought she had successfully navigated the turbulence and landed the plane. But something in her eyes gave her away. The way she scanned my face for clues. The way her smile kept resetting, twitching at the corners. She was nervous. She didn't know I had already started looking for cracks. She didn't know that while she was baking cinnamon rolls to cover the scent of her boredom, I was sniffing out the smoke. And the truth? I wasn't angry. Not in the way she expected. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum. I was just awake. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't brushing things off. I wasn't filling the silence with apologies for things I hadn't done. I was letting the silence sit. I was letting it speak. Kara reached across the counter and rested her hand over mine. Her skin was warm. Her fingers were manicured. It was a hand I had held 1,000 times. I really do appreciate you, Andrew, she said softly. I held her gaze. I didn't pull my hand away, but I didn't squeeze back either. I know that was all I gave her. 2 words. The game was already shifting. She just didn't know what pieces I had started moving. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of denial and cinnamon sugar, I think she felt it. She felt the draft coming from the door I had just unlocked. Liam always picked the same booth. It was in the back corner of Harlan's pub, right near the frosted window with the crooked blinds that never quite closed all the way. He said it was quieter there, better for thinking, but I think he just liked having his back against the wall. We had been friends for 20 years, since before the mortgages and the receding hairlines. We hadn't caught up in months. And after the silence in my kitchen that morning, I needed to hear a voice that didn't sound like it was hiding something. Or maybe, deep down, I needed confirmation. He was already seated when I arrived, sipping something dark and foamy. Man of the hour, he grinned, standing for a quick back pat. He looked the same as always, slightly disheveled, wearing a flannel shirt that had seen better days, with the kind of comfortable exhaustion that most men our age were like a second skin. Still doing that overworked and underfed analyst thing? He asked, sitting back down. Still pretending it makes me interesting, I said, managing a half smile. We ordered quick burgers, extra napkins, no pretense. That was the thing about Liam. He had that rare mix of blunt honesty and loyal restraint. He was the kind of guy who knew when to ask a question and when to let you sit with your silence until you were ready to break it yourself. But today, he was watching me a little too closely. You look leaner, he noted, tapping his glass against a coaster. Working out? Or just forgetting to eat again? Bit of both, I replied. Carr has been experimenting with air-fried vegetables. He snorted. Ah, the old silent treatment diet. I looked up sharply. The burger in my hands suddenly felt heavy. What? He shrugged, innocent enough. You know, the long-married slump. You don't talk. She doesn't cook. You both get in shape out of sheer boredom or frustration. Works wonders for the waistline. Terrible for the blood pressure. I tried to laugh. It came out hollow, like a cough in an empty room. The burgers arrived. The smell brought a brief comfort: grease, onions, charred beef. It was something familiar in a world that was quickly tilting sideways. I took a bite, but I couldn't taste it. My senses were dialed into something else, scanning the conversation for traps. So, how's Kara? He asked casually, picking at a fry. Still doing the nonprofit thing? She is, I said carefully. Busy? I nodded. Very. Liam chewed, nodded, and then looked like he was about to say something. He stopped himself. He took a sip of his drink. Then he looked at me again. I tilted my head. What is it? Liam hesitated. That wasn't something he did often. He was usually the guy who told you had spinach in your teeth before you even sat down. But now, he looked uncomfortable. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice below the hum of the bar crowd. You ever meet that guy she used to hang around with at those gala events? He asked. Bryce something? The name hit me. It hit like a tuning fork struck against a granite countertop, a sharp, vibrating hum that went straight through my ribs and settled deep in my chest. Bryce. I had seen the name on the screen only hours ago. Now, hearing it spoken aloud in the real world, it felt like a physical object, a stone, a weapon. No, I said, keeping my voice flat. Why? He sat back, swirling his drink lazily, trying to make the moment smaller than it was. Nothing really. Just, I ran into someone who used to work the catering circuit, a bartender. They mentioned Kara might have been mixed up in something complicated a while back. But it ended. Clean break, apparently. I kept chewing. Slow. Measured. I was pretending the bite hadn't suddenly turned to ash in my mouth. Complicated? I asked. I sounded calm. I sounded like I was discussing a tax audit or someone else's wife. Could have been gossip. Liam said quickly, retreating. You know how people love to make drama out of proximity. Two people stand next to each other too long, and suddenly there's a rumor. I gave a tight nod. Right. People talk. But the word stuck. Complicated. That is a kind of word you use when you don't want to say affair. It's the polite word for betrayal. It's the word adults use to dress up the wreckage they leave behind. Liam moved on. He sensed he had touched a nerve, so he steered the conversation towards safe waters. He talked about a fishing trip to Montana, some awkward date he had been on, a new promotion at his logistics company. I smiled. I nodded. I asked the right questions at the right times. But inside, my mind had already left the table. I wasn't in the pub anymore. I was back in my kitchen, staring at the phone. I was back in the living room, hearing Kara say she was bored. By the time we finished lunch, I couldn't remember a single thing Liam had said about Montana. Outside, the Denver wind had picked up. Dry leaves scraped along the sidewalk like something restless, something exposed. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue, but the air had a bite to it. As we parted, Liam clapped me on the shoulder. His grip was firm. "Hey," he said, "I'm sure it's nothing. You and Kara, you guys always seem solid." "Yeah," I said quietly. "We used to be." He gave me a look then. One of those brief, knowing glances men only trade when something unspoken gets very loud. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I wasn't. I drove home in silence. My hands were tight on the wheel, my knuckles white. There was no music, just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own pulse thumping in my ears. At a red light on 23rd Avenue, I pulled out my phone. I didn't care about the traffic laws. I didn't care about the cars behind me. I opened Kara's profile again. I scrolled slower this time. I wasn't skimming. I was studying. I looked at the tags. I looked at the locations. And there it was, a photo from 2 months back. It was innocuous at first glance. Kara at a gallery event, laughing mid-sip, a champagne flute in her hand. She looked radiant. She looked alive in a way she hadn't looked at home in years. I checked the tags. Tag beside her, just off the edge of her shoulder, was a handle. At Bryce _ I read the caption. "Some nights remind you what you deserve." 100 likes. Mostly women she worked with. A few heart emojis. And one comment from Bryce. "Always." That was it. One word. But it was enough. The light turned green. A car behind me honked. A sharp, angry sound. I didn't jump. I calmly put the phone in the cup holder and pressed the gas. I felt it then. Not rage. Not yet. It was clarity. It was a feeling of waking up from a long, confusing dream and realizing you are in a cold room. She hadn't just opened the door to suspicion with her talk of boredom. She had left it swinging wide. She had been careless. Or maybe she had been arrogant. She thought I was too dull, too checked out, too safe to ever notice. She thought I was the furniture. You don't hide things from the sofa. You just assume it isn't watching. But the sofa has eyes. And now, I was stepping through the door she left open. I wasn't going home to ask her about it. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Confrontation gives the other person a chance to prepare a lie. It gives them a chance to cry, to manipulate, to spin the story. No, I wanted the truth, the whole truth. And to get that, I had to be something I had never been in our marriage. I had to be a ghost. I had to be silent. I turned onto our street. The house looked the same as it always did. Brick, sturdy, respectable. But as the garage door rumbled open, I knew that the man pulling into the driveway was not the same man who had left that morning. That man had doubts. This man had a lead. The soft hum of my home office used to be the sound of comfort. It was a white noise that signaled productivity, order, and control. This room was my sanctuary. It was where I ran analytics, sorted tax files, read history books in peace, and cleared my head after a long week. But now, the air felt different in there. It wasn't hostile, exactly. It was alert. It felt like the air inside a courtroom before the judge walks in. I sat in my usual chair, the leather-backed executive one I'd had since grad school. The leather was worn smooth at the armrests. Kara always joked that it squeaked like an old man when I leaned back. I used to laugh with her. Tonight, the squeak sounded sharp. It was the only noise I made. I pulled out my phone and plugged it into my desktop. Then I opened the backup software. It was something I had installed quietly 2 nights ago during a bout of insomnia. I had stumbled upon it during a late-night spiral down an internet rabbit hole about data recovery. It mirrored deleted messages if the cloud settings were synced just right. And Kara, for all her attention to detail in her appearance, she wasn't as thorough with her digital housekeeping as she liked to believe. She thought deleting a thread on her screen meant it vanished from the universe. I tapped into the thread labeled Bryce. The screen lit up. A string of messages populated the window. They were recently deleted from her phone, but here, in the cold logic of my hard drive, they were preserved. Her words, his words. They scrolled up the screen in blue and gray bubbles, and with each swipe of my mouse wheel, my hands grew colder. I started at the bottom, and read my way up. Him. I keep replaying last weekend in my head. I wish you didn't have to go home to him. Her. I know. It's hard to leave. Every time. Him. God, I almost told you not to go. And then, the one that stopped my breath. Her. I know it's getting harder, but it's not the right moment yet. He's been distracted lately. I think he suspects something, but he's too passive to ask. The last one hit the hardest. Not because of the infidelity, but because of the assessment. He's too passive to ask. She was right. I had been passive. I had been quiet. I had been steady. And she had mistaken my stability for stupidity. She had mistaken my patience for weakness. I didn't cry. I didn't punch the desk. There wasn't a scream bottled up inside me waiting to tear my throat open. Instead, there was just a strange, hollow quiet. It felt like walking through a house that had burned down and realizing you had already memorized the floor plan before the fire. The structure was gone, but I knew exactly where everything had been. I knew exactly what was lost. I leaned back, the chair squeaked, and stared at the ceiling. Bryce, the man from the comments. The man from the gallery photo with the backward cap. My wife had called him Sunlight in one of the older messages. She had told him he made her feel awake. I scrolled further back. Some images were pixelated now, unrecoverable data ghosts, but I didn't need to see them. The words painted enough of a picture. What surprised me most was the emotion that settled next. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't hate. It was relief. It was a cold, hard relief. Not the kind that makes you smile, but the kind that straightens your spine. Because clarity, even when it stings, is cleaner than doubt. Doubt is a muddy water you drown in. Truth, no matter how jagged, is solid ground. I could stand on this. I stood up and paced the small room. I touched the edge of the bookshelf. I stopped at the wedding photo Cara, insisted we keep framed in wood on the corner of my desk. Her in white, me in navy blue, that wide Colorado sky behind us, promising a future as big as the horizon. I turned the frame face down. I didn't do it out of spite. I didn't slam it. I just placed it gently against the wood. I did it because I needed space to think. I needed to look at the room and see what was real right now, in this moment. Not what used to be real 20 years ago. The affair wasn't hypothetical anymore. It wasn't a feeling. It had a name, a voice, a timestamp, and a victim. Me. I realized then that I had time. She thought I was passive? Fine. I would use that. I had time to plan. I had time to decide how this would end on my terms. Because if there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty now, it was this. This marriage wouldn't be buried in secrecy. It wouldn't be swept under the rug of boredom. It would be ended with dignity. And when that moment came, she would see me, not as a man she thought she could deceive, but as the one she never truly understood. I didn't mention the messages. Not that night. Not the next morning. I just stopped. I stopped answering her when she called from the couch, asking if I wanted to watch a movie. I stopped lingering in the kitchen after dinner, where we used to share the last bite of dessert or talk about the logistics of the week. I stopped reaching for her under the sheets. By Thursday, I moved into the guest room. I offered no explanation. I didn't start a fight. I just took my pillow, my favorite blanket, and my laptop, and I relocated down the hall. Cara didn't ask why. She stood in the hallway and watched me carry the bedding. Her mouth parted slightly, as if the question lived there on her tongue, but her pride refused to let it breathe. Or maybe it was her guilt. If she asked why, she risked hearing the answer. I still came home at the same time every evening. I still rinsed my dishes. I still changed into my sweats. I still worked late on the computer, like I always did. Only now, the silence between us had a different weight. Before, it was just routine quiet. The silence of two adults coexisting in a familiar orbit. Now it was a wall. It was thick, heavy, and impenetrable. And she felt it. I watched her feel it. She tried to float over it, the way she always had. She relied on her charm, that breezy ability to pretend everything was fine until it actually became fine. She would poke her head into my office door around 8 p.m. "Tea?" she would ask, her tone casual, her smile soft and inviting. I would glance up from my screen, my face a mask of polite indifference. No thanks. She would hover for another second, her hand on the doorframe, as if expecting me to fold. She expected me to look at her the way I used to, with gratitude, with warmth. She expected me to seek her connection. But I didn't, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't interested. I still said good morning. I still held the door for her when we left the house at the same time. I still refilled the Brita pitcher when it ran low. I was polite. I was civil, but I gave her nothing else. Not my stories, not my warmth, not my gaze. And that, I think, was worse than rage. Kara's charm had always worked in chaos. She knew how to handle an argument. She knew how to cry in a way that earned forgiveness. She knew how to touch my arm just long enough to make me second-guess my own feelings. But with silence, with distance, she had no foothold. She was trying to climb a sheet of glass. I noticed her pacing more now. She lingered in front of the hallway mirrors longer, adjusted her clothes even when we weren't going anywhere. She put on perfume just to cook pasta. She lit candles during dinner, even though we didn't sit at the table together anymore. One night, she made steak. It was the exact way I liked it. Medium rare, rosemary butter, crisp green beans. She plated it beautifully on the good china. I ate half of it. I wiped my mouth. I stood up. "Thank you," I said. I returned to my laptop. I didn't mention how it tasted. I didn't compliment the effort. I didn't acknowledge the olive branch she had seared in a cast-iron skillet. I heard her clear the dishes quietly, alone in the kitchen. The clink of silverware against ceramic sounded lonely. She had never had to earn my attention before. It had always been free. A given. Now, she couldn't buy it. And still, I said nothing about Bryce. Nothing about the text. Nothing about the tiny, eroding truths she kept trying to patch over with cinnamon rolls and scented candles. Because I wasn't after a fight. I was after something slower. Something deeper. I was waiting for a reckoning. Not one shouted, not one slammed, but one lived. And every minute I didn't look at her the way I used to, that reckoning grew. It was gathering mass in the silence, waiting for the moment to break. I didn't set out to change. Not really. I wasn't trying to become a different man. I was just trying to find the one I had lost somewhere between the mortgage payments and the silent dinners. It started with a gym near my office. It wasn't one of those glass-walled fitness clubs with eucalyptus towels and juice bars. It was a basement space with old iron weights, flickering fluorescent lights, and a faint, permanent smell of metal and rust. The kind of place where no one cared what brand of shorts you wore, or if your shirt matched your sneakers. I signed up after work one Tuesday. I paid for 6 months up front. The next morning, I was there by 6:15. Treadmill first. Then weights. Nothing heroic. I wasn't trying to become an athlete at 52. I was just trying to move. The first week, my body ached like it hadn't in 20 years. My knees protested. My back was stiff. But by the second week, the aches became something else. They became fuel. I started sleeping better. The tossing and turning that usually accompanied my 3 a.m. thoughts about Carr and Bryce began to fade, replaced by a heavy, exhausted slumber. I was thinking sharper. I was breathing deeper. I shaved the beard I had kept for a decade. The one Carus had made me look distinguished. Underneath, my jawline was firmer than I remembered. I bought 2 new shirts. Slim fit, dark blue and charcoal. Simple, clean lines. I replaced the sensible, chunky sneakers Cara had bought me for Christmas 3 years ago. The ones I had worn until the soles were flat and the heels were crushed. I bought a new pair, black with crisp white trim. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. When you live with someone for a long time, you become a collage of their preferences. You wear the shirts they like. You eat the food they cook. You watch the shows they choose. Slowly, piece by piece, you disappear. I was simply putting myself back together. Cara picked up on it immediately. She watched me from the kitchen island one morning, as I tied my new shoes and adjusted the cuff of my jeans. She held her coffee mug with both hands, the steam rising around her face. "You're looking sharp lately," she said. Her voice floated lightly across the granite. I didn't look up. Thanks. She waited for me to elaborate, to tell her I was doing it for her, to tell her I was trying to spice things up. What's the occasion? She asked, trying to sound playful. No occasion. Just living, I wanted to say. Just finally living like I mattered to myself. Instead, I grabbed my keys. Just felt like a change. I saw the way her eyes lingered when I walked past her now. There was a subtle pause in her movement, the way she blinked a little slower, as if she were recalibrating a familiar image that no longer aligned with reality. She was looking at a map of a city she thought she knew, only to find the street names had all been changed overnight. One night, she came into the guest room while I was reading on my tablet. The door was open, but she knocked on the frame anyway. You've been working out, she said softly. She leaned against the door frame like we were strangers meeting at a party. I nodded a little, not looking up from the screen. You look good. I met her gaze then. Briefly. I feel good. Her shoulders dropped slightly. That's great. It wasn't small talk. It was curiosity cloaked in politeness. Because this wasn't a man she had trained to orbit her needs. This wasn't the quiet husband who used to apologize for taking up space. This was someone measured, someone composed, someone who wasn't chasing her anymore. The house began to feel different, too. Our routines drifted further apart. I'd leave early. I'd come home late. Sometimes I'd take the long way back, just to be alone a little longer. I'd drive past the city park, watching the runners. I'd stop and look at the view of the skyline from the hill on 23rd. I'd roll the window down and smell the pine in the cool air. I felt the pulse in my wrists. A steady rhythm reminded me I was alive. Kara tried to recalibrate, but her compass was spinning. One night, I found her waiting for me at the door. She had let her hair down. Usually, she kept it up after work. She was wearing the green blouse I once told her made her eyes look like mountain glass. You're late, she said with a smile. No, I said, walking past her to hang up my coat. I'm just not early anymore. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she let the silence answer for her. Inside, the house was spotless. Candles were lit again. Music was playing low, some jazz playlist she knew I liked. But the atmosphere didn't invite me. It tried to pull me in, and it failed. Something had shifted, and not just in the way I dressed or moved. It was in the way I stood straighter, the way I spoke less and listened more. And most of all, in the way I didn't need to be wanted by her anymore. Kara had once held the strings. She pulled and I danced. Now, she tugged and the line was slack. She didn't even know where the knots were anymore. And I was quietly undoing them. That weekend, she upped the ante. I came home from the gym on Saturday afternoon. The house was quiet. I walked up the stairs to grab a shower, passing our bedroom, the master bedroom. The door was open. The blinds were pulled wide, sunlight spilling across the bed. The sheets were fresh, crisp white. The old photo album from our honeymoon was open on the dresser. Kara sat at the edge of the bed. She was wearing a dress I hadn't seen in years. It was deep burgundy, silk. It was a dress she wore on our 3rd anniversary dinner, the night she surprised me with a hotel room downtown, and we danced barefoot on the carpet. She looked at me with that half smile she used to wear when she knew she caught my attention, the smile that used to make me drop everything. I thought, maybe we could talk tonight. She said, just us. I stopped in the hallway. I leaned against the doorframe, a towel draped around my neck, sweat still drying on my skin. I didn't step into the room. What would we talk about? I asked. She blinked, surprised by the friction. Us. There is no us right now. Kara, I said. I didn't say it cruelly. I said it plainly, like I was stating the time of day. She stood up slowly, smoothing the silk over her hips. Her hands were shaking slightly. We've had hard seasons before. Andrew, we can get through a slump. This isn't a season, I said. It's a storm you invited in. She flinched. Only a little, but enough. I walked past the door toward the guest bathroom. I opened a cabinet and pulled out a fresh bar of soap. When I came back out, she was still standing there. Her eyes were glossy, but her lips were pressed tight. She looked like an actress who had forgotten her lines in the middle of a play. That night, She made up the bed in the guest room. I hadn't asked her to, but when I went into sleep, the sheets were turned down. There was a glass of water on the nightstand. She came to my door around 10 p.m. She was wearing a silk robe now, the one she used to wear when she wanted to be touched without having to ask for it. I was sitting up in bed, typing an email. She knocked once. Soft, hesitant. "Andrew, can I come in?" I waited a beat. Then another. I looked at the cursor blinking on my screen. "No," I said. Silence. Then the sound of her footsteps retreating down the hall. I heard the master bedroom door shut gently. Then the lock clicked. It was the first time she had ever locked it. The next morning, there was a hot cup of coffee on the kitchen counter, before I even stepped into the room. 2 sugars, a dash of oat milk, just how I used to like it. I didn't touch it. She was standing by the sink, gripping the edge of the counter. She finally spoke as I reached for my keys. "I know you're angry." I turned to her, one hand on the doorknob. "No, Kara. If I were angry, you'd still have a place to stand. Anger is a connection. It implies I still care enough to fight. What am I supposed to do?" She whispered. Her voice was thin, fragile. "Feel it," I said. "Feel what?" "The distance," I said. "The cold, the consequence." Her lips parted, but no words came. Just a faint tremble in her jaw. I walked out, leaving her in a kitchen that smelled like second chances and burnt toast. And behind me, for the first time, I heard her cry, not the loud, dramatic sob she once weaponized in arguments to make me stop talking, but the quiet kind, the suffocated kind, the kind that comes when the person across from you no longer needs your apology, the kind that comes when you realize the person you hurt has simply outgrown you. The invitation came from Mark and Elena. They were old friends of ours, people we had known since Denver still felt like a new chapter in our lives. We used to do potlucks in their small apartment on Capitol Hill before they made money in real estate and moved to a sprawling place in Cherry Creek. It was one of those polished house parties. Open kitchen with marble islands the size of landing strips. A jazz playlist that was tasteful but generic. Hand-poured cocktails. Too many people smiling like they weren't tired. Kara wanted to go. She insisted on it. "It would be nice to be seen together again," she said. What she meant was, it would be nice to pretend we are normal. I agreed, not because I wanted to pretend, but because I had nothing left to hide. The man who hides is the man who is afraid of losing something. I had already lost a marriage. I thought I had. Now, I was just observing the wreckage. She dressed like she wanted to be remembered. A black silk dress that hugged her frame. Gold hoops that caught the light. Red lipstick. A shade she hadn't worn since our engagement party 20 years ago. She looked beautiful. I can admit that. But it was a beauty that felt frantic. It was the beauty of a desperate sales pitch. The moment we stepped inside, I felt the room shift. I saw the way people looked at us. Mark greeted us with a booming laugh, clapping me on the back, but his eyes darted to Kara and then quickly away. Elena hugged Kara a little too long, whispering something I couldn't hear. We moved separately. I caught up with an old co-worker near the fireplace. We laughed at someone's story about missing a flight to Tahoe. The laughter came easy to me. Lately, everything did. When you stop carrying the weight of trying to save a drowning relationship, you find you have a lot more energy for casual conversation. Kara stayed close at first. I could feel her presence like a frantic satellite. She was watching me. She was calculating the distance between us. She was trying to see if I was angry, if I was drinking too much, if I was going to make a scene. But I was just me. I was smiling. I was relaxed. I was present in a way I hadn't been in years. At one point, I stepped outside on the patio to grab some air. The night was crisp. Snow had started to fall. Faint, gentle flakes that melted the second they hit the flagstones. When I came back inside, Kara was by the bar. Her eyes were flicking nervously between me and the woman I had been talking to earlier. Tessa. She was a freelance photographer, a friend of Elena's. Smart, warm, harmless. We had been talking about hiking trails near Boulder. But to Kara, Tessa was a threat. To Kara, who had built her marriage on the idea that I was quiet, obedient, and safe. Seeing me engaged with another woman was terrifying. She didn't know this version of me. She didn't know the man who stood straighter in his new charcoal shirt. She didn't know the man who wasn't rushing to her side to refill her wine. Later, I was mid-conversation near the kitchen island. A small group of us were debating the best ski slopes for beginners. Kara stepped up beside me. She didn't say a word. She just touched my elbow gently. Then she leaned close. She kissed me. It wasn't a peck. It wasn't affection. It was a performance. It was a long, deliberate, breathy kiss. She pressed her body against mine. She put her hand on my chest. It was designed for one thing: showmanship. She was marking her territory. She was telling the room, "Look, we are fine. Look, he is mine." I didn't kiss her back. I let it happen for a second. I stood there, still as a statue, letting her lips move against mine. Then I stepped away. I did it slowly, surgically. I broke the seal of the kiss and took a half step back, creating a foot of air between us. I looked at her. Her eyes were closed, her face flushed with the effort of the act. She opened them, expecting to see desire, expecting to see the husband who would crumble at her touch. Instead, she saw me. I spoke in a calm voice. It wasn't loud, but in the sudden quiet of the kitchen, it cut deeper than a shout. "I'm not in the mood to taste your lover. Kara." The words hung in the air. They didn't need to be shouted. The silence did the work for me. Every conversation around us stopped. The debate about ski slopes died instantly. Even the jazz music seemed to turn itself down. Someone coughed. A drink glass clinked softly against the granite counter. Kara froze. Her hand dropped from my arm like it had been burned. Her mouth opened slightly, then shut. Her cheeks flushed a deep, violent red. Not from embarrassment, from exposure. For the first time, she realized the walls of her secret life weren't just closing in. They were made of glass. And everyone marked Elena, Tessa, the strangers by the cheese board. Everyone could see through them now. A beat passed, then another. I didn't wait for her to respond. I stepped past her without another word. I walked through the quiet discomfort of the crowd, found a chair by the window, and sat down with my drink. I looked out into the backyard. The snow was falling harder now. Absolute. Clean. Across the room, people whispered behind half-empty wine glasses. Eyes darted back to her. Kara remained rooted near the island. She was breathing shallowly. Her hands were wrapped around herself like armor, hugging her own ribs. She looked small. She didn't follow me. She didn't speak. She just stood there, surrounded by the life she had curated. The friends, the status, the image. All of it was now cracked and flickering like candlelight in a draft. And for the first time in our entire marriage, looking at her standing there alone in her black silk dress, I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little. The party bled into the driveway in a blur of awkward goodbyes and half-hearted hugs. The guests filed out in quiet clusters, their breath pluming in the cold air. Their eyes studiously avoided mine. They avoided hers, too. No one asked questions. They didn't have to. The silence in the kitchen had told them everything they needed to know. Kara stood near the car, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The heels she had strutted in earlier now looked unsteady on the pavement. Her mascara had smudged just enough to betray how hard she had tried not to cry in the bathroom mirror before we left. She was quiet until the car doors shut, and we were alone under the harsh glare of the interior light. Then the dam cracked. "That was cruel," she hissed. Her voice was shaking, vibrating with a mix of shame and adrenaline. "You humiliated me." I didn't flinch. I put the key in the ignition, but didn't turn it. "You kissed me in a room full of people after months of silence," I said calmly. "What exactly did you expect me to do? Perform for you? Clap like a seal?" "It was one moment," she said, her voice rising. "You didn't have to say that. You didn't have to call him my lover." I looked at her then. I really looked at her. Not the way I used to, with warmth or patience, but like a man seeing something for what it finally was. "I gave you silence for weeks, Kara. I gave you space. You didn't ask why. Because I knew something was wrong." She shot back. I didn't want to make it worse. I took a step closer to the truth. You were already making it worse, I said. Every night you deleted texts. Every time you walked past me and thought I couldn't feel the guilt pouring off you. She blinked, stunned still. The words landed like ice water. I know about Bryce. There, no theatrics, no yelling, just the truth. Finally spoken aloud in the small, enclosed space of our sedan. Her lips parted, but nothing came out, just a sharp intake of breath. I continued. The texts, the photos, the little digital trail you thought you were so careful erasing. Her hand rose halfway to her chest, like it might shield her somehow. Andrew, it wasn't like that. You told him it was harder to leave every time. I quoted. You told him you were waiting for the right moment, that I was distracted, that I was too passive to suspect anything. She went pale. The blood drained right out of her face. I read every word, Kara. For a second, she looked like she might collapse. She slumped against the passenger door. But then came the instinct, the one she always reached for when she was cornered. Denial, minimization. Maybe I was confused, she whispered. Maybe I just needed something that felt alive. You were so distant, Andrew. We were roommates. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly her. Even in the wreckage, she was looking for a way to blame the road conditions. Then you should have had the decency to leave, I said. You should have packed a bag before you started rotting our life from the inside out. Her voice cracked then. It wasn't love, Andrew. It was just a distraction. I nodded. Exactly. She looked at me, confused. That makes it worse, Kara. If you've fallen in love, if you found your soulmate, I might have understood. I might have respected the tragedy of it. But you threw us away for distraction? You traded 13 years of loyalty for a thrill? She stepped toward me now across the console, panic beginning to override her pride. She reached for my hand on the gear shift. Please don't do this. We can fix it. We've had hard years before. We've survived worse. Worse than betrayal? I asked. Worse than watching the person I trusted most try to pretend like nothing ever happened? Her face crumpled. Tears began to spill, cutting tracks through the powder on her cheeks. I'm sorry, Andrew. I made a mistake. I thought I could handle it. I didn't think you'd find out. That's the part that matters. I cut in. I pulled my hand away from hers. You didn't stop because you realized it was wrong. You stopped because I found out. You aren't sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. She sobbed then, a harsh, ugly sound. I begged you to talk to me. I tried to make dinner. I tried to be nice. I gave you weeks to say something real, I said. Weeks. And what did you give me? Candles. Fake smiles. You served me steak and dressed up in the same dress you once seduced me in, thinking I wouldn't notice the script. I was trying. She whispered. No, I said. You were manipulating. You were trying to reset the board, without admitting you had knocked over pieces. She took a shaky breath, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. So this is it? I looked out the windshield at the dark street. The snow was falling steadily now, covering the world in white. It looked peaceful. It looked like a fresh start. I already called a lawyer. Kara blinked. Her mouth trembled. You're serious? I pulled out my phone from my pocket. I unlocked it with a swipe. On the way home from the party? No, 2 days ago. I scheduled a call. First thing Monday? She choked out. I nodded. You'll get the paperwork in a few days. I'm not contesting anything. I don't want the house. I don't want your money. But I'm not negotiating either. She stared at me. She looked like a child who had dropped a vase and was waiting for the punishment. Andrew, please. I started the car. The engine purred to life, vibrating through the seats. This isn't a punishment. Kara, I said quietly. I turned to her one last time. It's a mirror. She stared at me, confusion and grief warring in her eyes. You spent months showing me exactly who you are, I said. Now, I'm just showing you what that looks like. She sat there in the passenger seat, breath fogging the window, arms still wrapped around herself like something had come undone. And she was the only one just now feeling it. I still love you, she choked out. I know, I replied. I put the car in gear. That's what makes it so sad. You love me enough to say it, but not enough to mean it. Then I pulled away from the curb. No slamming, no screaming tires. Just the sound of gravel under rubber and a weight that no longer belonged to me. I drove us home in silence. When we got there, she went upstairs to the bedroom. I went to the guest room. I fell asleep almost instantly. It turns out the heaviest thing you can carry in a marriage isn't anger. It isn't even sadness. It's the hope that things will go back to the way they were. And once you put that down, you can finally rest. The courthouse smelled like old paper and resignation. It's a distinct scent, isn't it? A mix of floor wax, stale coffee, and the dust of 1,000 arguments that didn't end well. It's the smell of things that were once alive being filed away into cabinets. I arrived 10 minutes early. I was wearing my new charcoal suit, but I didn't wear a tie. I shaved that morning. My pulse was calm, unnervingly calm. I checked my reflection in the rear-view mirror before I got out of the car, and the man staring back at me didn't look like a victim. He looked like someone who had finished a long, difficult book and was finally closing the back cover. I brought nothing with me but a leather folder and the kind of clarity that doesn't ask questions anymore. Kara was already there. She sat 2 rows ahead in the waiting area, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. Her hair was pulled back tight, the way she always wore it when she felt like things were spinning out of control. It was a severe look, pulling at her temples, as if she were trying to physically hold herself together. She glanced over once as I entered. Her eyes met mine, then quickly darted away to the scuffed linoleum floor. She looked tired. Not the sleepy kind of tired, but the soul-deep exhaustion of someone who has been running a race on a treadmill. Her attorney sat beside her. He was flipping through a manila folder with the boredom of a man who charges by the hour. He looked like he was deciding what to order for lunch, acting as if something in those papers might still be salvageable. It wasn't. My lawyer, Janet, walked in a moment later. She was sharp, composed, and absolutely no nonsense. She was a woman who spoke in periods, not question marks. She sat beside me and leaned in close, lowering her voice. She's trying to claim emotional duress, Janet whispered. She wants to negotiate a softer outcome. She's citing the incident at the party as public intimidation. I looked at Janet. I didn't blink. We won't be doing that, I said. Janet nodded once. Good. The session was short. It was almost insulting how short it was. You spend 13 years building a life, merging finances, sharing holidays, learning how the other person takes their coffee, memorizing the sound of their breathing in the dark, and then a judge in a black robe unravels it all in 20 minutes. The judge reviewed the file without much ceremony. The printed messages, the ones from Bryce, the ones about waiting for the right moment, were logged neatly in an exhibit tab. They were just data now, evidence. Kara didn't speak. Neither did I. There was nothing left to clarify. When the judge asked if both parties were certain, I answered immediately. Yes. My voice didn't shake. It didn't waver. It was the most honest word I had spoken in that room. Kara hesitated. I saw her shoulders rise and fall. I saw her hand tighten around a pen until her knuckles turned white. For a brief second, I wondered if she was going to object, if she was going to stand up and scream that this was all a mistake. But she didn't. She looked at her lawyer, who gave her a subtle nod. Yes, she finally forced out. Her voice cracked on the vowel. That was the sound of a door locking from the outside. No drama. No outbursts. Just ink and silence. The paper slid across the desk. The sound of paper scraping against what was louder than it should have been. I signed first. Andrew. 6 letters. A signature I had used on mortgage documents, car loans, and anniversary cards. Now it was a release form. Kara signed second. Her hand trembled. She dropped the pen once, picked it up quickly, and scribbled her name. And with that, 13 years of marriage became a closed file in a government cabinet. It was done. As we stood up to leave, the air in the room felt lighter. Or maybe I just felt lighter. But she tried one last pivot. The hallway outside the courtroom was quiet. Just a shuffle of a janitor's mop. Somewhere down the corridor and the low, electrical hum of vending machines. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like trapped flies. Kara stepped toward me. Her eyes were rimmed in the kind of redness that comes from nights spent rewinding every word too late. She looked smaller than she had in the courtroom, without the table between us. She looked exposed. You didn't have to make it public, she whispered. I stopped. I turned to face her. What? That comment at the party, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and shame. You ruined everything. You made sure everyone knew. I looked at her calmly. I felt a strange sense of pity, not for her situation, but for her blindness. You ruined everything. Kara, I said. I just stopped covering for it. She shook her head, tears welling up again. You could have let it stay private. We could have handled this quietly. I was private when I gave you weeks to say something, I said. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the passing strangers wouldn't hear. I waited in that house. I slept in the guest room. I gave you every opportunity to come to me with the truth. And what did you do? You answered with smiles. You answered with dresses. You answered with lies about cinnamon rolls. Her voice dropped lower. They all talk about me now. I can feel it. People avoid me at the grocery store. I lost 2 clients last week. Friends won't return my texts. That wasn't me, I said. That was your reflection catching up to you. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't believe the man standing in front of her was the same man she had married. She took another step, searching my face with the Andrew she knew, the soft Andrew, the pushover Andrew. What happened to you? She asked. It was a genuine question. I smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was just honest. I started respecting myself. She looked away then, her jaw tight. She knew there was no answer to that. She knew that any argument she made against my self-respect would only prove how little she had for me. Her attorney called her name from the end of the corridor, checking his watch. Kara, we need to finalize the filing fee. I watched her walk toward him. Her heels echoed against the linoleum. Click, click, click. Each step seemed a little less certain than the last. She looked back once, just before she turned the corner. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I just stood there. And just like that, she was gone. No scene. No final hug. No promises to stay friends. Just distance. I walked to the exit. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped out. Outside, Denver was wrapped in mid-morning stillness. The sky was bright but cold, a hard, uncompromising kind of blue that felt honest. The air smelled of snow and pine. I took a slow breath. I filled my lungs until my chest felt tight, and then I let it out. For the first time in over a decade, I exhaled without tension. No one was waiting for me in the car. No one was tracking my location on a phone. There was no performance left to maintain. There was no one I had to be enough for. Just me, standing in the cold. But finally whole. It was early fall when I realized I was happy again. It didn't happen all at once. It was a cymbal crash or a sudden burst of fireworks. It was more like the way the leaves turn, slow, quiet, inevitable. One day you look out the window and realize the green is gone, replaced by something warmer, something that feels like it's been waiting to arrive all along. The air had that crispness that asks nothing of you but to notice it. The kind of air that smells like wood smoke and dried apples. The leaves in the vineyard were gold and copper, curling at the edges, whispering change with every gust of wind coming off the foothills. I stood near the edge of the vineyard, a glass of champagne in my hand. I was watching couples gather near an arched trellis wrapped in white lights. There was laughter in the air, not the polite cocktail party laughter of the life I used to live. This was the warm, easy kind, the kind you don't have to fake. Next to me, Olivia smiled. She adjusted her shawl, pulling it closer against the chill. She wasn't loud. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't constantly scanning the room to see who was watching her, or trying to calculate if she was the most interesting person in the conversation. She was just steady. She was thoughtful. She was the kind of woman who listened with her eyes, not just her ears. When you spoke to her, you didn't feel like she was waiting for her turn to speak. You felt heard. We weren't married. Not yet. We were taking it slow. At our age, you learn that speed is the enemy of substance. You learn that the best things are the ones you let simmer. But when she touched my arm to point out a hawk circling above the vines, it didn't feel like possession. It didn't feel like a claim. It felt like home. We had been invited to a wedding. They were mutual friends of ours, people I had met through a hiking group I joined a few months after the divorce. It was a second marriage for the groom, a first for the bride. There is something incredibly moving about a wedding between people over 50. There is no naivety there. They know the statistics. They know that forever is a long time and that people change. They have seen the ugly parts of love, the lawyers, the silence, the drift, and yet they stand there anyway. They stand there and promise to try again. Hope was everywhere that afternoon. It was in the centerpieces made of autumn wildflowers. It was in the way the groom looked at his bride, not with the starry-eyed hunger of a 20-year-old, but with the deep, grateful relief of a man who has walked through the desert and finally found water. I looked at Olivia. She caught my eye and smiled, crinkling the corners of her eyes. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded. "I'm better than okay." And I meant it. I wasn't thinking about Kara. I wasn't thinking about the empty house or the silence of the last year. I was thinking about how good the sun felt on my face. I was thinking about how nice it was to stand next to someone and not feel alone. Someone took a photo of us right then. I didn't even realize it at the time. We were laughing at something the officiant said, a joke about how combining two households means negotiating a peace treaty over whose toaster oven gets to stay. I threw my head back and laughed, a real belly-deep laugh. Olivia was beaming, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. It was just one of those candid moments. Unguarded, unfiltered. It captured something I hadn't seen in myself in a decade. It captured a man who was light, a man who wasn't carrying a backpack full of stones. Later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange, I took a walk by myself down one of the rows of grapes. The soil was soft under my dress shoes. I thought about the journey to get here. I thought about the gym in the basement with the rusty weights. I thought about the charcoal suit in the courtroom. I thought about the moment I turned down the volume on the noise of my old life so I could finally hear myself think. It is a terrifying thing to burn down your life. It is terrifying to look at a partner of 13 years and say, "No more." But standing there in the vineyard, surrounded by the evidence of new seasons and second chances, I realized something profound. The fear of leaving is always greater than the pain of being gone. When you are in it, you think you'll die of loneliness. You think the silence will crush you. You think you will never figure out how to use the coffee maker or how to fill the weekends. But then the fall comes. The air clears. You meet someone who likes the same hiking trails as you. You find that you actually enjoy cooking for one. You realize that peace, boring, quiet peace, is worth more than all the drama and excitement in the world. I walked back to the reception tent. I saw Olivia waiting for me near the entrance, holding 2 fresh glasses of wine. She didn't look impatient. She looked happy just to see me return. I walked toward her, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I was walking on solid ground. Later that week, the photo made its way online. You know how it goes. The bride posted an album. Friends tag friends. The algorithm did its work, stitching the digital world together in ways that are both miraculous and intrusive. I was tagged in it. Andrew and Olivia enjoying the toast. I looked happy. I looked younger. Actually, my posture was different. My smile reached my eyes, and Kara saw it. I know she saw it because late one night I checked. I wasn't doing it out of longing. I wasn't pining for her. It was a habit, a muscle memory that hadn't quite faded yet. Or maybe it was just curiosity. The same way you slow down to look at a car wreck on the side of the highway, just to confirm that you are safe and moving past it. Her profile was still public. She had posted 1 hour ago. It was a moody black and white photo of a rainy window. No caption, just a quote overlaid on the image in a stark typewriter font. Something about regret. Something about how we don't realize what we hold until we open our hands. And then I saw the notification. Carl liked the photo of me and Olivia. She didn't comment. She didn't send a message. Just that quiet, undeniable presence. A digital fingerprint left on the glass of my new life. It was haunting in a way. She hadn't been invited to this wedding. She didn't know these people. She certainly didn't know this version of me. The version that laughed with his head thrown back. The version that was loved by a woman like Olivia. But she was watching. She was sitting somewhere, maybe in a house we used to share, or maybe in a small apartment she rented after the sale, scrolling through a screen, looking at a window into a room she was no longer welcome to enter. I clicked on her profile one last time. Her follower count had dropped. The friends we used to share, Mark, Elena, the couples we did dinner with, they didn't engage with her posts anymore. They had chosen sides, as people do, not because I asked them to, but because people naturally gravitate toward authenticity. They gravitate toward the person who didn't blow up the community for a cheap thrill. She was unfollowed by many who once praised her spark. She was posting into a void. I heard to the grapevine, because Liam still hears things, that she and Bryce didn't last 3 months. Of course they didn't. Affairs are built on fantasy. They are built on the adrenaline of the secret. Once the secret is out, once the boring husband is gone and the thrill becomes a Tuesday afternoon reality, the excitement evaporates. You are left with two people who are selfish, trying to build a foundation on sand. She tried to reshape the story for a while. I saw the captions. She played the victim. She blamed stress. She blamed my emotional withdrawal and my midlife crisis. She tried to paint herself as the woman who was starved for affection. But truth has a way of rooting itself, no matter how many filters you use. People saw the timeline. They saw the dates. They saw the dignity with which I walked away in the chaos she drowned in. And in that photo, the one she liked, the one that must have stung like iodine on a cut, I wasn't pretending. I wasn't smiling to make her jealous. I wasn't holding Olivia's hand to prove a point. I was simply happy I had let go. She hadn't. That is the tragedy of it. She traded a steady life for a fleeting thrill. She traded a husband who would walk through fire for her, a home that was paid for, and a history that mattered. She traded the mirror that once showed her something noble, a wife, a partner, a builder of a life. And what did she get in return? She got a few months of excitement. She got some flattering text messages. She got to feel alive for a season. But seasons change. The leaves fall. The snow comes. Now, all that was left was a scroll. The screen. The silence of a room where the phone doesn't ring. I set my phone down on the nightstand. Olivia was asleep next to me. Her breathing was slow and rhythmic, a soft sound that filled the room with peace. The radiator clanked gently in the corner, a warm, familiar sound. I didn't block Kara. I didn't need to. Her seeing my happiness wasn't my revenge. It was just a reality. I turned off a lamp. I pulled the quilt up to my chin. I closed my eyes and listened to quiet. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full. That's what betrayal really costs in the end. It doesn't just cost you the person you betrayed. It costs you the ability to be happy for them when they survive it. I drifted off to sleep, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream of the past. I didn't dream at all. I just slept, and when I woke up, the sun was shining, and the coffee was already brewing. There's a lie we tell ourselves when we reach the middle of our lives. It is a seductive lie, one that whispers to us when the house is quiet and the kids are gone and the career is plateaued. The lie says, you are running out of time. It tells you that if your heart isn't racing every day, you are dying. It tells you that routine is the enemy. It tells you that the person sitting across from you, the one who knows how you take your coffee and which knee hurts when it rains, is holding you back from some great cinematic third act. That is what Kara believed. She thought boredom was a cage. She thought the silence of a long marriage was the sound of things ending. She didn't realize that silence is actually the sound of things holding. It has been 3 years since the wedding in the vineyard. Olivia and I are married now. We didn't have a big ceremony. We went to the courthouse, a different one this time, and then we had dinner with our closest friends in the backyard. It was quiet. It was simple. It was perfect. I still think about Kara sometimes. Not with anger. The anger burned itself out a long time ago. Anger is a young man's game. It takes too much energy to keep the furnace going. I think about her with a kind of heavy sadness. I heard she moved to Arizona last year. Liam told me. He said she wanted a fresh start. That is a phrase people use when they have burned down all the bridges in the old place. A fresh start. It sounds hopeful, doesn't it? But often, it is just running away from the smoke you created. I wonder if she found what she was looking for. I wonder if she found someone who makes her heart race. But more than that, I wonder if she realizes what she lost. You see, excitement is cheap. You can buy excitement. You can find it in a stranger's smile, in a secret text message, in a new city. Excitement is a commodity. But being known, being truly, deeply known by another human being, that is rare. That takes time. That takes decades of boring Tuesdays. It takes sitting through the silence until you realize it isn't empty. It's full of trust. If you are listening to this, and you are sitting in a room with someone who has been there for the long haul, look at them. Maybe they are reading a book. Maybe they are scrolling on their phone. Maybe they are just staring out the window. Maybe you feel like the spark is gone. Maybe you feel like you are just roommates. Be careful with that feeling. Be very careful with the word bored, because boredom is a luxury. Boredom means you are safe. Boredom means you are healthy. Boredom means you have built a life that is steady enough to stand still. Do not mistake peace for emptiness. Do not mistake the coals for ash. The fire might not be roaring like it did when you were 20, but the coals are what keep you warm through the night. Kara kicked over the coals because she missed the flames. And now she is out in the cold. I am not. I am sitting on my porch. The sun is going down. Olivia is inside making tea. I can hear the kettle whistling. It is a shrill, ordinary sound. To anyone else, it's just noise. But to me, to the man who almost lost everything because he didn't value the ordinary, it is the most beautiful sound in the world. So, go make the coffee. Fix the loose floorboard. Sit on the couch and say nothing at all. Love isn't always a firework. Sometimes, love is just an anchor. And you don't realize how much you need an anchor until the storm comes. Don't wait for the storm to find out what you have. Hold on to it now, while it's quiet,